In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, there was a space station known as Orion's Refuge. It hung in the void like a solitary jewel, its intricate architecture a testament to the collective efforts of countless alien civilizations. The station bustled with activity. Its halls echoed with the sounds of many species going about their daily lives. Merchants from distant star systems bartered goods in the sprawling marketplaces, while scholars huddled in vast libraries, poring over ancient texts and galactic records. It was here, amid the endless hum of curiosity and ambition, that Threx, a young Zarnian scientist, first heard the whispers of the forbidden rule. Threx had always been different from others of his kind. With his tall, slender frame and silver-hued skin that shimmered faintly under the station's artificial lights, he carried an air of quiet determination. His bright, golden eyes, always alert, revealed a mind constantly at work, seeking answers to questions others dared not ask. For years, Threx had devoted himself to studying the history of the galaxy's most catastrophic wars, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that spanned millennia. One evening, while Threx was deep within the archives of Orion's Refuge, his clawed fingers carefully scrolling through holographic records, he stumbled upon a file that immediately caught his attention. Its title, written in an ancient universal script, read, "The Legacy of the Humans." The word humans was rarely spoken aloud, and when it was accompanied by hushed tones and uneasy glances. Threx had heard the legends, of course, stories passed down through generations about a species so dangerous, so unpredictable, that their very existence had nearly brought the galaxy to ruin. His pulse quickened as he accessed the file, a stream of information spilling out before him. Grainy images of battles filled the air, showing massive human warships clashing with alien fleets. Descriptions of their tactics, brilliant, brutal, and devastating, appeared alongside casualty numbers that made Threx's stomach turn. He read about the final conflict, a war so destructive that it had left entire star systems in ruins. The records ended with a chilling declaration: humanity has been contained. The galaxy must never awaken them again. Threx leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had always been fascinated by the idea of ancient civilizations and their rise and fall, but this was different. The humans were not just a relic of the past, they were a warning. Yet, as he stared at the words on the screen, a flicker of doubt crept into his thoughts. How could a single species be so powerful, so feared, that an entire galaxy would conspire to erase them? And if they were truly gone, why were the records so deliberately vague about their fate? That night, Threx couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters, the hum of the station's life support systems a constant reminder of his isolation. Questions swirled in his mind, each more troubling than the last. Were the humans really extinct, or had they been hidden away as some of the rumors suggested? And if they were hidden, why? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't ignore this mystery. He needed to know the truth. The next morning, Threx made his way to the station's central hub, where he sought out Elder Vazarin, one of the most respected historians on Orion's Refuge. Vazarin was an ancient being, her azure scales dull with age, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She had spent centuries guarding the galaxy's secrets, and Threx knew that if anyone could shed light on the humans, it would be her. "Elder Vazarin," Threx began, bowing respectfully as he approached her study, "I seek your guidance on a matter of great importance." Vazarin looked up from her work, her eyes narrowing as she regarded him. "You have always been a curious one, Threx. What troubles your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "I have been studying the great wars of the past, and I came across records of the humans. There is much I do not understand, but one thing is clear: their story is incomplete. I wish to learn more." Vazarin's expression darkened, and for a long moment she said nothing. Finally she spoke, her voice low and measured. "There are some truths, young one, that are better left buried. The humans are a danger that the galaxy cannot afford to face again. Their story was not incomplete. It was silenced for the good of all. But why? Threx pressed. What could they have done that was so terrible? Basran sighed, her gaze distant. It is not what they did, but what they are. Humans are different from any other species we have encountered. Their resilience, their ingenuity, their capacity for destruction, it is unmatched. They were warriors, creators, and destroyers all at once. When the war ended, the galaxy united in its decision to end their threat forever. And Threx frowned, his curiosity only growing. And how was that achieved? The elder hesitated, then leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. They were put into stasis, locked away in a hidden place where they could sleep for eternity. The location of their tomb was sealed, known only to a select few, and the galaxy moved on, leaving them to fade into legend. Threx's heart raced at her words. So the humans were not extinct, they were merely sleeping. The implications of this revelation were staggering. If the humans could be found, if they could be awakened, the possibilities were endless. But even as his mind raced with ideas, a warning bell sounded in his thoughts. Vazran's words had been clear. The humans were dangerous. To disturb them would be to invite chaos. "Thank you, Elder Vazran," Threx said, rising to his feet. "I will consider your words carefully." As he left her study, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions. He knew the logical thing to do would be to heed Vazran's warning and leave the matter alone, but the spark of curiosity burning within him was impossible to ignore. He had to know more. Later that day, Threx returned to the archives, determined to find the coordinates of the human stasis facility. He combed through countless records, piecing together fragments of data, until, finally, he found what he was looking for, a set of coordinates buried deep within a classified file. His hands trembled as he copied them onto his personal device. That night, as Threx prepared his ship for departure, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something monumental. The galaxy had one rule: don't wake the humans. But rules, Threx thought, were meant to be challenged. As his ship's engines roared to life, he set a course for the forbidden planet, unaware of the consequences his actions would unleash. Threx's ship, the Eclipser, tore through the void of space, its sleek metallic hull reflecting the dim light of distant stars. The coordinates he had uncovered led him to the edges of the galaxy, where forgotten planets drifted in cold isolation. He sat at the controls, his golden eyes fixed on the navigational screen. The closer he got to his destination, the more his excitement warred with the gnawing sense of unease in his chest. The icy planet loomed ahead, its surface a swirling mass of snow and jagged mountains. No signs of life flickered on his sensors, only the empty silence of a world abandoned long ago. Threx activated the ship's autopilot, ensuring a smooth descent into the planet's atmosphere. The winds howled as the Eclipser broke through the icy layers, its thrusters glowing orange against the white expanse below. As he approached the ground, the outline of ancient structures came into view, half buried under layers of snow and frost. These ruins, he realized, must have belonged to those who had built the stasis facility. He landed near the edge of what appeared to be a large circular structure, its entrance framed by massive stone pillars. Snow covered much of the area, but faint carvings could still be seen etched into the rock. Threx stepped out of his ship, his insulated suit shielding him from the biting cold. His breath misted in the frigid air as he approached the entrance, his boots crunching against the ice-coated ground. The carvings on the pillars depicted scenes of war, humans battling towering alien creatures, their weapons blazing with light. The artistry was crude but powerful, each stroke imbued with the weight of history. Threx's gaze lingered on one particular carving, a lone human figure standing atop a pile of fallen enemies, a banner held aloft in triumph. He shivered, though not from the cold, and forced himself to move forward. The entrance to the structure was sealed by a thick metal door, its surface marked with warnings in countless alien languages. Threx's translator device projected the words into his field of vision. "Do not enter. Humanity must sleep forever." He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the control panel embedded in the door. This was it, the moment he could still turn back. But the thought of leaving empty-handed, of abandoning the greatest discovery of his career, was unbearable. He began working on the control panel, using tools from his utility belt to bypass the ancient security system. The mechanism resisted at first, its circuits sparking as he manipulated them, but eventually the door groaned and slid open, revealing a dark corridor that stretched deep into the earth. Threx activated the light on his helmet, illuminating the path ahead. The walls of the corridor were smooth, lined with intricate patterns that glinted faintly under his light. As he ventured deeper, the air grew warmer, the cold of the surface giving way to a strange, unnatural heat. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of his equipment. He soon reached a vast chamber, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. In the center of the room stood a cluster of massive, cylindrical pods, each one encased in glass that had frosted over with age. Faint lights blinked on the consoles attached to the pods, indicating that the systems were still operational. Threx's heart raced as he approached the nearest pod. Wiping away the frost from the glass, he peered inside. A human lay within, suspended in a state of perfect preservation. It was a man, his features sharp and regal, his body clad in some kind of sleek black armor. Scars marred his face, a testament to battles fought long ago. Threx felt a chill run down his spine. This was no ordinary man. This was a soldier, a warrior frozen in time. He moved from pod to pod, examining each one. Men and women of varying ages were encased within, their expressions eerily calm. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, stretching far beyond what he could see. The weight of the discovery pressed down on him. These were the humans the galaxy had feared, the ones who had been hidden away to prevent further chaos. And now, after all these centuries, Threx was standing among them. His attention was drawn to a central console, larger and more complex than the others. The interface glowed faintly, its alien symbols pulsing in rhythm. Threx activated his translator, deciphering the text. Status system active. Do not interrupt. But as he examined the console, his curiosity got the better of him. He began running scans, his device probing the system's data. Information flooded his screen, records of the humans' vitals, their history, and the mechanisms keeping them in stasis. As he worked, a faint vibration began to hum through the chamber. Threx froze, his eyes darting to the pods. The lights on their consoles flickered, and a soft mechanical hiss filled the air. He realized, too late, that his scans had triggered something within the system. Panic gripped him as he rushed to shut down his equipment, but the process had already begun. One of the pods at the center of the chamber began to glow, its frost-covered glass slowly clearing. Threx watched in horror as the figure inside stirred, his eyes fluttering open. The man's gaze was piercing, a vivid green that seemed to burn through the glass. The pod hissed again as its locks disengaged, and the lid began to rise. Threx stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. The man stepped out of the pod, his movements slow and deliberate. He surveyed the chamber, his expression calm but calculating. Threx could feel the weight of the human's presence, the raw power radiating from him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The human turned his gaze to Threx, tilting his head slightly as if assessing him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the stasis systems. Threx felt as though he were being judged, his every thought laid bare before this ancient warrior. And then, in a voice deep and resonant, the man spoke. The words were incomprehensible to Threx, but their tone was unmistakable, a command, sharp and unyielding. The human stepped forward, and Threx's instincts screamed at him to run, but he was frozen, caught between his fear and his awe. The chamber's vibrations grew stronger, the lights flickering wildly. Threx realized with dawning horror that the activation of one pod was causing a ripple effect. More pods began to glow, their occupants stirring as the system came to life. He had set something in motion that could not be stopped. As the humans began to awaken, Threx finally found his voice. "What have I done?" he whispered, his words swallowed by the rising chaos. The vibrations grew more intense, shaking the walls of the chamber as one pod after another began to glow. Threx stood frozen in the center of the chaos, his wide golden eyes darting between the awakening humans. The air was filled with the rhythmic hiss of pods releasing their seals, a sound that felt like the slow opening of a forbidden gate. He could feel the heat emanating from the stasis systems, a warmth that seemed to pulse with the same eerie rhythm as the glowing pods. The man who had first emerged was now fully awake, his gaze sharp and unrelenting. His green eyes scanned the room, moving from one console to the next before locking onto Threx. Without a word, the human stepped closer, his boots echoing against the metallic floor. Threx's heart pounded as he instinctively stepped back, his body tense and his mind racing. The human stopped a few meters away, tilting his head slightly, as if studying an insect. The human's voice, deep and commanding, reverberated through the chamber as he spoke again in his unknown tongue. Threx's translator crackled to life, struggling to parse the ancient language. Fragments of meaning filtered through. Who? Awakened. Purpose. The incomplete phrases did little to calm Threx's growing panic. He swallowed hard and raised his hands, palms open, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. I didn't mean to disturb you," Threx stammered, his voice trembling. "It was an accident." The human narrowed his eyes, his expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate precision, he reached down to the console nearest to him, his fingers moving across the controls with ease. Threx watched in stunned silence as the human navigated the ancient system as though it were second nature. Lines of data scrolled across the screens, and the glowing lights on the remaining pods began to stabilize. One by one, the pods opened, releasing more humans into the chamber. The second to emerge was a woman, her auburn hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. Her armor, identical to the man's, gleamed under the dim light, and her piercing blue eyes immediately found Threx. She stepped out with the grace of a predator, her movements smooth and calculated. Her gaze flicked to the man, who nodded once, and she moved to another console, her hands quickly taking over a separate system. More humans began to awaken, their faces a mixture of confusion and determination as they assessed their surroundings. Threx realized with growing dread that these were not ordinary beings. Each one carried an aura of authority and power, their movements precise, their expressions devoid of fear. These were soldiers, leaders, brought back from a time of war. The man turned back to Threx, his voice sharper now, the fragmented translation clearer. "Why here? Purpose? Mission?" Threx struggled to respond, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear and regret. "I was curious," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I didn't understand what this place was." The man's expression hardened, and he exchanged a glance with the woman, who had been quietly monitoring the consoles. She spoke in the same language, her tone colder, more analytical. The translator offered no help this time, leaving Threx to guess at her words. Whatever she said, it caused the man to nod sharply before turning back to Threx. "You broke seal," the man said, the words clipped but clear enough to send a shiver down Threx's spine. "Now, consequences." Threx opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a loud rumble shook the chamber. The humans turned in unison, their attention snapping to the far end of the room where a massive door began to slide open. Beyond the door, faint blue lights flickered, revealing a passage that led deeper into the facility. The woman spoke again, her voice firm and resolute, and the man nodded before gesturing for the others to follow him. Threx watched as the humans moved with military precision, their boots striking the ground in perfect rhythm. The man paused at the entrance to the passage, turning back to Threx and motioning for him to follow. "You, come!" The words were not a request. Threx hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to flee, but the man's unwavering gaze left no room for argument. Taking a shaky breath, Threx stepped forward, his legs feeling like lead as he followed the group into the passage. The corridor was long and winding, its walls lined with glowing blue panels that pulsed faintly with energy. The air grew warmer as they descended, the hum of machinery growing louder with each step. Threx kept his eyes on the humans ahead of him, their movements confident and unhesitating. He couldn't help but feel like a trespasser, an unwelcome guest in a place he had no right to be. After what felt like an eternity, the group emerged into a massive underground chamber. The space was dominated by a towering structure that pulsed with a soft golden light. Dozens of consoles surrounded the structure, their screens displaying incomprehensible data. The woman immediately moved to one of the consoles, her fingers flying over the controls as she analyzed the information. The others spread out, each taking a position as though preparing for a battle. The man turned to Threx, his expression unreadable. "This core," he said, his voice low, "heart of war." Threx's eyes widened as he realized what the man meant. This structure, this core, must have been the central hub of their operations, the source of their power during the war. Whatever secrets it held, they were now at the humans' mercy. The woman called out to the man, her tone urgent. He moved to her side, scanning the data on her console before nodding. Turning back to Threx, he spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. "You see now, cannot undo." Threx felt a cold wave of dread wash over him. He didn't fully understand what the humans were planning, but one thing was clear. His actions had set something irreversible into motion. The core pulsed brighter, the golden light illuminating the chamber as the humans worked with silent efficiency. Threx stood at the edge of the room, his body tense and his mind racing. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had not only awakened the humans, but had also reactivated their greatest weapon. And now, whatever happened next was out of his hands. The golden core in the center of the chamber pulsed with growing intensity, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. The humans worked in unison, their movements precise and purposeful. Each of them seemed to know exactly what to do, as if they had rehearsed this moment countless times. The hum of the machinery around the core grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath Rex's feet. He stood frozen at the edge of the room, his mind racing with questions he was too terrified to ask. The man with the piercing green eyes, whom Threx had come to think of as their leader, spoke in rapid, clipped sentences to the others, his voice firm and commanding. The woman with the auburn hair responded in kind, her tone calm but urgent. Threx couldn't understand their language, but the intensity of their exchange was unmistakable. Whatever was happening, it was escalating quickly. Threx's translator device crackled to life, catching fragments of their words. Activation, prepare, defense. External threat detected. The words sent a chill down his spine. He looked at the leader, his golden eyes wide with fear. "What threat?" Threx asked, his voice trembling. "What's happening?" The man turned to him, his expression unreadable. "You brought outside eyes," he said slowly, his voice low and deliberate. "They watch." Threx frowned, struggling to grasp the meaning of the cryptic statement. "Who's watching?" The woman interrupted, her voice sharp as she pointed at one of the consoles. The screens were now displaying images of ships, alien vessels that Threx recognized as belonging to the Galactic Coalition. His stomach sank. The Coalition was the largest and most powerful alliance in the galaxy, known for its strict enforcement of intergalactic laws. If they had detected the activation of the stasis facility, it meant only one thing: they were coming. The leader's eyes narrowed as he studied the screen, his jaw tightened, and he issued a string of commands to the others. The humans sprang into action, moving swiftly to prepare the chamber. Threx watched in stunned silence as they armed themselves with weapons that had been concealed in compartments along the walls. The leader turned back to Threx, his expression hard. "Coalition comes," he said simply. "They fear us. They will attack." Threx felt a wave of panic wash over him. "No, that's not possible," he stammered. "The Coalition enforces peace. They won't attack unless they think you're a threat." The man's gaze was cold, unyielding. "We are threat," he said. "Always." Before Threx could respond, the room shuddered violently and the lights flickered. A deep rumble echoed through the facility, followed by a blaring alarm. The woman called out from her station, her voice filled with urgency. The leader moved to her side, his expression grim as he examined the data on the console. "They come now," the man said, his tone final. He turned back to Threx, his piercing green eyes locking on to the Zarnian scientist. "You will see truth." The words were both a warning and a promise, and Threx felt his knees weaken under their weight. He clutched his translator device tightly, his claws trembling. He wanted to protest, to insist that this wasn't what he intended, but the words caught in his throat. Deep down, he knew it was too late to change anything. A sharp mechanical whir drew Threx's attention to the core. The golden light had intensified, bathing the room in a warm, almost blinding glow. The woman was working furiously at her console, her auburn hair falling across her face as she barked commands to the others. The core began to emit a low, rhythmic pulse that resonated through the chamber, its vibrations growing stronger with each passing moment. Suddenly, the massive door at the far end of the room slammed shut, sealing the chamber. The humans moved with purpose, positioning themselves strategically around the room as they prepared for an imminent attack. Threx found himself pushed to the side by the leader, who gestured for him to stay put. "Do not move," the man said firmly. "You are not prepared." Threx didn't argue. He pressed himself against the wall, his golden eyes darting between the humans and the core. The tension in the room was palpable, every second stretching into an eternity. The hum of the core grew louder, its golden light pulsating in sync with the vibrations beneath the floor. It was as if the facility itself was awakening, responding to the threat on its doorstep. A deafening explosion shook the chamber, and the lights flickered wildly. The consoles sparked as the Coalition's ships fired upon the facility, their weapons pounding against the outer defenses. The humans remained calm, their expressions focused and determined. The leader barked a command, and the others responded in perfect unison, their movements seamless. The woman activated a holographic display revealing a tactical map of the facility and the surrounding area. Dozens of Coalition ships were converging on the planet, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like blades. The facility's automated defenses were struggling to hold them off, and the outer layers of the structure were already beginning to fail. The leader turned to the woman, his voice firm but steady. "Shield, core, prepare, counter." She nodded, her blue eyes sharp as she worked the console. The core's golden light began to intensify, its pulse quickening. Threx watched in awe and terror as the humans coordinated their actions with precision, their movements almost machine-like in their efficiency. He had never seen anything like it. Another explosion rocked the chamber and the ceiling groaned under the pressure. Dust and debris rained down and Threx shielded his face with his arm. The leader moved to the center of the room, raising his weapon, a sleek black rifle that hummed with energy. He glanced at Threx one last time, his expression unreadable. "You wanted truth," the man said. "Now you have it." Before Threx could respond, the man turned and raised his weapon, aiming at the sealed door. The other humans followed suit, their weapons glowing with a faint blue light. The core pulsed one final time, its golden light washing over the room, and then the chamber was plunged into silence. The door exploded inward, and the Coalition forces poured into the room, their weapons blazing. The humans moved as one, their responses swift and calculated. Energy blasts lit up the chamber, the sound of battle deafening. Threx pressed himself further against the wall, his heart pounding as he watched the scene unfold. The humans fought with an intensity that defied explanation, their movements almost too fast to follow. The leader was a blur of motion, his rifle firing with pinpoint accuracy as he took down one coalition soldier after another. The woman moved with equal precision, her auburn hair whipping around her as she coordinated the defense. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the coalition forces were struggling to gain ground. The humans' tactics were unlike anything Thrax had ever seen, their actions perfectly synchronized. It was as if they were operating on an entirely different level, their minds and bodies working in perfect harmony. As the battle raged on, Thrax felt a growing sense of dread. The humans were everything the legends had warned about, unstoppable, unrelenting, and utterly terrifying. He realized now why the galaxy had feared them, why the coalition had gone to such lengths to ensure their stasis. These were not mere soldiers, they were living weapons. And he had unleashed them. The core pulsed again, its golden light flaring brighter than ever. The humans were holding their ground, but Threx could see the toll the battle was taking. The coalition forces were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. For the first time, he wondered if anyone would survive this conflict, and what the galaxy would look like if the humans emerged victorious. The battle raged on with relentless intensity, the chamber shuddering under the weight of the conflict. Blasts of energy ricocheted off walls, and the golden light of the core pulsed like a heartbeat, growing brighter with every passing second. Threx cowered against the cold metallic wall, his chest heaving as he struggled to comprehend the chaos unfolding before him. He had wanted answers, but now the truth loomed before him in the form of humanity's terrifying potential. The leader, his green eyes sharp and unyielding, commanded the humans with precision. His voice cut through the din of battle, his orders spoken with a clarity that spurred his comrades into swift action. The woman with the auburn hair moved with lethal efficiency, her movements so fluid it seemed as though the battle had been choreographed. Together, the humans fought as a single, unstoppable force, their coordination unlike anything Threx had ever seen. But the coalition forces continued to pour into the chamber, their numbers overwhelming. The humans, though formidable, were still vastly outnumbered. The woman shouted something to the leader, her voice rising above the chaos. He nodded sharply and gestured toward the core, his expression resolute. Threx watched as the humans began to shift their focus, forming a protective perimeter around the pulsing structure. The core was the key, Threx realized. It was the source of the humans' power, their history, and perhaps their last hope for survival. The woman worked furiously at one of the consoles, her fingers flying across the controls as she accessed the core's systems. Her blue eyes flicked to the leader and she called out again, her tone urgent. The leader responded with a curt nod before turning his attention back to the advancing soldiers. Citation exlatum. Core awakens, the leader said, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable weight. He glanced at Threx, his expression unreadable. You must leave. Threx blinked, his golden eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean? I can't leave now, he shouted, his voice trembling. I started this. I need to see it through. The leader's gaze hardened, and he stepped closer, towering over the Zarnian scientist. No, he said firmly. You survive. Warn Galaxy. Before Threx could argue, the woman's voice cut through the tension. She called out to the leader, her tone filled with urgency. The core's light was intensifying, its golden glow now blinding. The vibrations in the chamber had reached a deafening crescendo, and the air felt charged with energy. The leader turned back to the woman, his expression grim. He issued a final set of commands, his voice steady despite the chaos. The humans began to move with renewed urgency, their actions deliberate and synchronized. The woman continued working at the console, her auburn hair damp with sweat as she manipulated the core's systems. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with a deep, resonant hum. The core's light flared, and a wave of energy radiated outward. pushing back the Coalition soldiers and forcing Threx to shield his eyes. When the light subsided, the room was eerily silent. The Coalition forces had been thrown into disarray, their ranks broken by the sheer force of the Corps' energy. The leader turned to the woman, his expression unreadable. She nodded, her blue eyes filled with determination, and stepped away from the console. The Corps' glow began to shift, its golden light fading into a deep, ominous red. Threx's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. The woman approached the leader, her expression calm despite the chaos around them. She spoke in their language, her voice steady and resolute. The leader nodded, his green eyes meeting hers in silent understanding. He then turned to Threx, his gaze piercing. "Core will destroy," the leader said, his voice low. "All who come, humans, remain." Threx's heart sank as the weight of the words hit him. The humans weren't planning to escape. They were preparing to make their final stand, to ensure that the Coalition forces and anyone else who dared to interfere would be annihilated. The core wasn't just a weapon, it was a fail-safe, designed to unleash humanity's fury one last time. "No," Threx whispered, his voice trembling. "You can't do this. There has to be another way." The leader shook his head, his expression resolute. "This way," he said. "You leave. Tell Galaxy, not return." Before Threx could respond, the woman approached him, her movements swift but deliberate. She grabbed his arm, her grip firm but not unkind, and began leading him toward the edge of the chamber. The leader followed, his weapon at the ready as he kept an eye on the remaining Coalition forces. The woman stopped at a small escape hatch hidden behind a panel in the wall. She pressed a series of buttons and the hatch slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel that led upward. She looked at Threx, her blue eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Pity, perhaps? Or something deeper? "You go," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Live." Threx hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to protest, to stay and fight alongside them, but the determination in her eyes left no room for argument. With a shaky breath, he stepped into the tunnel, his claws gripping the edges for support. He turned back to look at her one last time, but she had already returned to the center of the chamber, her focus now on the core. The tunnel was narrow and steep, and Threx struggled to climb as the vibrations grew stronger. The sounds of battle faded behind him, replaced by the relentless hum of the core. His mind raced as he ascended, his heart heavy with guilt and fear. He had come seeking answers, but now he carried the burden of what he had unleashed. When he finally emerged onto the planet's icy surface, the harsh winds stung his face and the blinding light of the stars greeted him. He turned to look back at the facility, its structure glowing with the ominous red light of the core. In the distance, he could see the Coalition ships regrouping, preparing for another assault. And then it happened. A blinding explosion of red light erupted from the facility, consuming everything in its path. The ground shook violently, and Threx was thrown to the ground as the shockwave rippled through the air. The Coalition ships were obliterated in an instant, their forms disintegrating under the sheer force of the blast. The facility itself was consumed by the light, its structure collapsing as the energy wave expanded outward. When the light finally subsided, all that remained was silence. The facility was gone, reduced to nothing but a smoldering crater. The humans, the Coalition forces, and the core, all of it had been wiped away. Threx sat in the snow, his body trembling as he stared at the devastation. He was alive, but the weight of what he had witnessed pressed down on him like a crushing force. The humans had sacrificed themselves to protect their secrets, to ensure that no one would ever disturb them again. As he climbed back into his ship, Threx knew that his life would never be the same. He carried with him the knowledge of humanity's power, their sacrifice, and their warning. The galaxy had one rule: don't wake the humans. And now, Threx would make sure that no one ever broke it again.